Thanks for checking out this horror debate series video. So once again, how this is going to work, you're going to hear my side of an argument, and then you're going to go to your friendly neighborhood Uncle Pete's channel, which is linked in my description, watch his side of this same argument, and then come back to my channel, go to the community tab, and vote on who you think defended their pick the most, or did the best job making the case for this. And obviously this one is, what is the most influential horror film of all time? Uncle Pete floated this idea, and I was like, recently or like of all time? And he was like, of all time. And I'm like, this is going to be hard. But I, sat on it for a bit, thought for a while, first started then thinking, let's go way back. Because I want to pick, if you're going to pick the most influential, you have to pick something very early in horror film that continues to kind of resonate throughout the genre. So first, I think of The Haunted Castle, which it was like a 3-minute film. It was the very first horror film ever made, but barely anyone's ever seen that thing. There is a copy, though, that was found and restored and is being taken around and shown to people, but it hasn't had enough of an impact. Then I thought one of the old films that I love, The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. Beautiful, amazing film, part of the German Expressionist movement. A lot of influence in film. But not enough. Then I settled on the one that's my pick. 1922's Nosferatu. I know a lot of people say, that's a lame pick, that's an easy pick, because it's just the oldest vampire film. Actually not true, because there was a Hungarian, I want to say. I think I have on my notes. There was an older film from another country in Europe that was a vampire film, specifically Dracula, that came before this film, before Nosferatu. So I'm thinking to myself, okay, this is what really popularized vampirism. And it seems to continually come up in the horror genre anyway. You don't hear nearly as much about The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari as you do hear Nosferatu. Now, I like the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari more than Nosferatu, but I think Nosferatu is the correct pick, and I'm going to walk you through why I feel that's the case. And I think you'll see that I have a very strong argument here. Though it wasn't the first, this is my first point, though it was not the first vampire film, it pretty much set the standard for vampires and vampire films. You look at Max Schreck, you look at the way he played Count Orlok, he set the standard for what a vampire would be like, at least early on, that he was going to be like real creepy. Obviously, we've kind of moved away from that a bit. As time's gone on, the genre's flirted with other things, having humorous vampire films and having good-looking vampires who are into just getting it on and not that bad of guys and stuff like that. But for a while, it was about these menacing vampires. And it worked extremely well, and this was the blueprint, basically. Nosferatu was 100% the blueprint for it. So, really did set the standard. It also took Bram Stoker's Dracula, I think took a few liberties with the story and kind of gave a bunch of things that ended up becoming kind of canon when it comes to vampirism as well. So I'll talk about that in another point, but yes, it set the standard for vampire films. So right there, that's a lot of influence, because vampire films are still happening. It's not like it started a subgenre of horror that's no longer around. It's still going. Next point. It's been copied and referenced so many times in film and other aspects of horror. Like I said, you hear about it a lot. It gets referenced a lot. Even had a fictional behind-the-scenes film made out of it, which would be Shadow of the Vampire, which had Willem Dafoe and John Malkovich in it. I've actually not seen that film. I've heard it's very much worth seeing, and I do want to see it at some point and review it, but I'm just didn't get there yet. But, that also, we just got a tease, I think it was the end of 2022, that Robert Eggers is, I don't know if it was a joke, but he put something out there about doing a Nosferatu remake. The fact that this film from 1922 is going to get a remake, and people will see that, most likely, it'll be relatively popular, especially from someone like Robert Eggers, speaks volumes about it. And also the fact that there was even The Shadow of the Vampire, which is a fictionalized film about the making of that film. And it was well reviewed. People liked it. it keeps going. For it to have, I think The Shadow of the Vampire came out, what, early 2000s, late 90s, early 2000s, somewhere in there. And the fact that it was, hitting with the horror community then, and then we're potentially getting this remake of Nosferatu, it speaks volumes. All right, my next point. Just the performance of Max Schreck as Count Orlok alone left an indelible mark on the genre, with many people marveling at and emulating his performance. I have heard people in commentary tracks, I've heard people in interviews from the film industry talk about using Count Orlok and Max Schreck's portrayal of Count Orlok as inspiration for creating stories that they write scripts around, creating characters, actors even incorporating some of that stuff into the characters they play on screen, because it was a very unsettling, creepy character that seemed realistic based on how it was played by Count Orlok. He did such an amazing job with it, and I think for that reason it was just a very early amazing example of taking a character and making it something that it wasn't necessarily on the page, increasing it even more. And that's just a credit to what Max Schreck did. Next point. It took one of the most influential books, Bram Stoker's Dracula, and put it on the big screen in a way that established vampire tropes for a long time. I already kind of touched on this a little bit by it being referenced so much and it kind of setting the standard for vampirism, but one of the examples being the fact that Count Orlok is killed by sunlight. That is not something that was like commonly talked about and commonly used with vampirism, but it kind of set that standard, and then you've seen it used still now. Like, still vampire films coming out now have vampires dying in light. Not all of them, obviously, but it gets used a good amount. Next point. It inspired many filmmakers who would go on to inspire other filmmakers. This is a film that, like I was saying, I've heard in commentary tracks and I've heard in interviews that people are inspired by this film. They look to it for inspiration. It had an indelible mark on them when they were young, and that's one of the things that got them into the horror genre and making film in the horror genre. So even there, it's just giving them the motivation to replicate something that inspired them this much. Then those people go, they take that inspiration, they make their own films, and then where does it go from that? They inspire other people, and it's just this cycle that keeps going on and on and on, that in some instances, not all, but some instances, can be tracked all the way back to Nosferatu, giving inspiration to some people. And coming to my last point, it was a very key part of German Expressionist filmmaking. This movement was a huge influence on film in general, and I was trying to think of ways to kind of sum up what German Expressionism was, for people who don't necessarily know. And I found a website instead because I'm like, I'm not putting this the best way, so let me find a better example. So this is from filmlifestyle.com. I think they put it quite well. German Expressionism in film is a movement that utilized distorted sets, strong contrast of light and dark, expressionistic acting, and other devices to evoke moods through visuals. German Expressionism was often used as a means of social criticism or commentary on the emotional state of Germany at the time. Now, obviously, there's so much in that you can see in Nosferatu that was taken since and incorporated into other films. Now, I'm not saying that Nosferatu was, all of it, but Nosferatu was a part of this movement, a very recognized, important part of this movement that inspired so much filmmaking. I mean, just think about it. Distorted sets. You saw that in plenty of other films. And that can even include like shooting at a different angle so things kind of look like elongated or off. I mean, I can just think of, or off the top of my head, Oz Perkins' Hansel and Gretel, Gretel and Hansel, which I just recently watched. And that has that type of thing. It's like making things look kind of distorted. Strong contrasts of light and dark. That's something that's been used so long in film. Expressionistic acting. Obviously, that's just gone on and on and on and been improved upon. And other devices to evoke moods through visuals. Obviously, there's been a lot of emphasis put on mood through visual with film because it's, a visual medium. But The other big thing I want to point out is the social criticisms and kind of looking at society and reflecting back the ills of society at the time. This is something that's become the backbone of a lot of horror films. Not all horror films, because there's some out there that's just like, let's just have a body count, let's just have cool kills, let's just have fun. And there's definitely a place for that. But there's also this portion, some people may call it elevated horror. I don't necessarily. I don't like that term really. But other ones that are doing this deep analysis of what's going on with society and what the ills are, and reflecting society back to you, the audience, on the screen, but in a different way, as subtext, as a metaphor. It's wonderful. So that's the end of all my points. Hopefully you feel that you want to vote for me for this one. Again, watch Uncle Pete's video, get his points on this. And if you've already done that, you can just go directly to the community tab on my page and vote for who you think had the best argument, who argued this the best. But thank you everyone for participating in this. We wanted to do this third one. We wanted to make sure it was more of like a positive, picking something good, both of us. Because the first one was, I was saying something negative, he was saying something positive. The second one was we were both saying something negative. So I was like, let's get some more positivity going on here. So positive, picking good things. So anyway, thank you everyone for checking this out. If you want to put some comments about what you think maybe is the most influential horror film, and even if you don't want to do of like all time, maybe even like more recently, interesting conversation to have. I would be interested to hear from all of you. Just give me like a few sentences. You don't have to go wild with, doing paragraphs. But if you do, I will read them. I will respond to them. Do me a favor, hit subscribe to my channel and the notification bell button. Also do that for Uncle Pete. We both greatly appreciate that. And it is a show of your appreciation for us putting as much time as we do into these videos, plus our other videos. But regardless, thanks for checking these videos out. And until next time, keep it brutal.